Good morning, YouTube. How you doing? Kevin here with a comparison video on the G5, which is found on your KE100s, and the G4 10-speed motor. I've been getting a lot of questions on these two particular engines. Are they completely interchangeable? What do I have to do to put a newer motor on my older bike? And the reason for this is a lot of the parts are hard to find. After I posted my video, I got all kinds of emails on it. Well, I have a G4 motor 10-speed, but I'm missing parts out of it, or the gear is stripped out and I can't find it. What do I do? And are they interchangeable? What do I have to do? And there are literally a lot of variables I'm going to go over with you on these two motors. They are completely different, yet they look very similar. We're going to start off with the bolt pattern and how they mount into the frame. All the bolt patterns on all these air-cooled 100cc motors are the same. These will definitely bolt into the frame without any issue. I've done it myself. So if you want to put a G5 motor in a G4 frame, no problem. Just take the bolts out of that motor and bolt in this motor. However, you're going to end up with some differences, and I'm going to show you what some of those differences are. Okay, we're going to start off on this side right here, and I'm going to pause it for a second. I'll be right back. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the cover off this side right here on the motor. I must have a bolt in there someplace. Stuck on the shaft, of course. Sorry about that. I was stuck on the shaft, on the shifter shaft. Okay, so the one of the things you're going to have to do is change over your neutral safety switch right there. It is different from the newer style bikes. The newer ones have a push-in pin. The G4 right there, you can see how I already robbed it off. It would fit right there. I already put it on here. Has the old-fashioned screw-in type. This is the newer Kawasaki KE100 motors. Okay, and you're gonna have to change your mag, because the mag looks the same, but the wiring is completely different. It's completely different. Now, I already cut the pigtail off on this one right here because I needed it for something else I was working on. But see the yellow connector for the alternator? This mag that's in this is from that motor right there. So, you're going to have to change over your magneto, because now you look at the wiring. See if I can get it here in focus. These are all your wires. They're all completely different. So you have many more wires coming off this mag than you did the original. However, the bolt pattern and the ignition timing is the same, and it does the mags are different as well. One has multiple magnets, one has our standard 3 magnet. You're going to want to use the magnet that goes with the magneto. Don't use a 3 when it requires a 6. Okay? It's not going to be right. So, that would basically conclude this day. In fact, the 15 tooth is the same on both bikes, and the chain location is also in the same exact location. So your shifter is going to be in the same location, your chain is going to connect the same, your magneto is going to mount on the same. Use the flywheel that goes with your magneto. Okay, The bolt patterns are the exact same. In fact, the what do you call it there? Everything is pretty much the same on this side of the bike, except for this is not a 10-speed. This is a regular standard 5-speed, and that's your 10-speed gearbox right there. Okay, so now that we get that done, let's go over this one more time. You're going to need to change your magneto and your neutral safety switch, and make sure you keep your flywheel with that. And that's all you're going to need to convert on this side of the bike. Okay. Move some stuff out of my way. Moving on to the other side, I'm going to pause you and flip these around. Okay, so now we're looking at the newer style, what do you call it there? G5 motor right there, and the G4 motor. Very similar, very similar. Okay, so what you're gonna need to do in this case is the carburetors are interchangeable. You can use either carb, whatever your bike prefers, but the rubber mount that goes over this right here is different, and the throttle cable is different. The throttle cable that goes with this motor has the quick disconnect. The one that goes with this motor does not, it just has a regular slide in. So your throttle cables are different. If you're going to use this motor with the carburetor that goes with the G5, you're going to need to use the Kawasaki KE100 what do you call it there? Throttle cable, and as well as the clutch cable. This clutch cable right here that's in here now actually came out of the G4 G4 motor, and it doesn't have the box on it for the whatchamacallit there, the kickstand release. So you can use the cable from that motor. It will work. The other thing, okay, and now we're going to talk about oilers. The oilers are basically the same thing, but they are a little different. The one for the G4 right there is basically mounts upside down. The one for the G5 has the throttle up top, the lever. So see this piece right here? You can see that now? Here we go, right there. That's the part that moves back and forth on your throttle cable. It grabs it from the bottom, and this one right here grabs it from up top. So they're not compatible per se. They will bolt on. You know, I guess you could mount them on the same. They're just upside down. One's upside down. So they are compatible. They're just one's upside down. I have mounted the G5 onto the G4. It was just upside down. And as always, you have to I'll show you. As always, you have to line up your marks. Just that this one here would be upside down like that. So they are compatible. Same gasket, and this one gets adjusted here to be an adjustment screw right here, because the cable will come down with the oil line would come down the same hole and grab it right there. So they are compatible. They are the same. Just one's upside down, one's right side up. And and you have to use all the other covers from the G5 motor. So with that said, on this side of the motor, you'd have to use, if you want to keep the G4 throttle cable assembly, you're going to have to use that carb. If you want to put the newer style on, well then you got to change, well you have to change the boot anyway, because this boot right here is held on with that spring elastic that goes around it, whereas the G4 motor is screwed on with 4 cap screws. So you got to keep that in mind. And the kick starters are in the exact same spot and position, and they're interchangeable. That's what I'm trying to basically go over with you guys. There's a lot of interchangeable stuff here. So what we have is the carburetors are interchangeable, the throttle cables are interchangeable, but you have to use the boot and that with that carburetor. You have to match the systems. So if you're using a G5 carb, you have to use the G5 throttle cable. If you're using a G4, you have to use the G4 throttle cable with the G4 carburetor. Real simple. The jets are the same. Go figure. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a couple of other things. On the older model, the G5, I mean the newer model, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. The G5 doesn't have a dipstick, just has a plug on the top right here. And if you want to see how it's what do you call it there, if you want to see how much if you're full on the G5 motor, you got to pull out that screw right there. On the G4 motor, when you pull the dipstick, that's what you get. Dipstick. Right there. And that's how you would tell. They are not interchangeable. You can't put the dipstick, because it'll hit. See that? It'll hit. So they are not compatible. You can't put the G4, the dipstick tube or dipstick into the G5, and there is no plug on the G4. There's no plug. So the only way to tell is by pulling the dipstick. Okay, moving on to the next part. We're going to move on to the back side of the motor. Other than being dirty, these are two junk spare motors. They're just parts motors. Okay. Alright, now we're on the back side of the motor, and you may notice that the motors look identical. Literally identical. What's the difference between the back side of the motor? Absolutely nothing. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the front side of the motor. Okay, now that we're at the front side of the motor, piston side of the motor, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the two in comparison. Okay? The stroke is different. The jugs are not interchangeable. The wrist pin bearings are different bearings. The studs are basically the same length, but nothing's interchangeable on that top end except for the cylinder head. You can use the G4 on the G5 when it comes to cylinder heads. The jug has the same mounting, the same gasket. Everything is the same with the exception of a few different things. Alright, I'm going to show you guys what happens when you put a G4 cylinder onto a G5 motor. Okay, I'm going to expand that. This is a G5 engine with a G4 jug. The piston from the Kawasaki KE100 goes over it almost 3/16 of an inch. I mean, it's pretty far. I mean, it's high. It's high. So you cannot use this jug on this engine. However, they have the same stroke because that one has a deeper stroke. The G4 has the same stroke as the G5 because the configuration is different. The piston location on the wrist pin is different. So it does the same stroke, just in a different configuration. And the other thing that you would have to do if you were going, there's two modifications, heavy modifications that are not for the faint of heart, that has to be done if you're going to put a G4 motor, a G5 motor on a G4 frame. And I'm going to show you what those are. Okay, so I didn't pause it. Sorry for doing that right in front of you like that. Okay, so the first thing you would have to do is do the exhaust. The flanges are not the same. They are completely and utterly different. So what you would have to do, and the mufflers will not bolt onto the frame. So you would have to cut the engine pipe and weld the flange, change the flanges over. However, they are in the same location. They're at two different heights. So you're going to have to bring your bike down to a fabricator and have them fabricate your exhaust to go from the spring style to the bolt style. And even if you unbolt that flange, it's not going to be good enough to fit onto it. It's not going to be right. So keep that in mind. If you decide to do this modification, you will have to go to a professional welder and have them modify your exhaust. Also too, you can see that there is a height difference on the two, what do you call it there, two jugs. I don't know if you can see that from the video. See if I can get something I can put across the top and I'll show you. You can see there's definitely a height difference. Okay. Big truck going by. Alright, so I took a file and I put a file on there. It was a straight file, so, and I put a battery on top of it. You can see how big of a gap is at the bottom here. I got the number 4 screwdriver, and I don't know if you can see that or not. It's basically, it's like I said, it's almost a 1/4 of an inch. I mean, it's pretty substantial, and that's why your piston protrudes over it. With that said, the exhaust is at a different angle and pitch, so you would have to have that welded. And the other modification, that's the major one. That right there is the one that's the only major modification you would have to do to the bike, and which would be to have that welded, which won't be all that bad. The other one you would have to do, the other modification, real simple modification. Okay, and you would have to notch out the upper part of your side cover for your chain on this side right here, because it will hit the frame. And the measurements for that is from the front of the motor to the back of the motor. It's going to be 5/8 of an inch, and from the top to the bottom, which would be a 1/2 inch. So that would be the measurement to cut out right there for frame clearance. As you can tell, I've already done these modifications and had a G5 motor on an older Kawasaki 100. There's the oil tank to it. An actual 100 Kawasaki, and it wasn't all that bad. So what do you call it? The motor's right there, the original motor. And then I took the bike apart. It had the tank was all smashed in, and it had all kinds of other issues with the bike that I got so many Kawasaki's. It's not even, it don't even matter. You know what I mean? It's just, it was one of those things. It was a fun little project, but the bike had just seen better days. Frame was rusted up pretty bad, and water had gotten into one of the tubes from a rust hole and swelled up, and it was just really bad. So anyway, I just figured I'd show you some of the conversions of what you would have to do if you were thinking about putting a Kawasaki KE100 motor on a Kawasaki 100, a GTR or GT, what the hell is it there? The GT100 or whatever you want to call it. Kawasaki there, the G4 there. So hopefully this information will help you out, because the parts aren't interchangeable all the way, but the motor will bolt to the frame. And with a little bit of, if you're good at welding, your only downfall will be your exhaust, really. The mag changes over, the carburetor changes over. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that would work. And all the major components, your carburation and your electrical will all work, which is a great thing. You just got to keep your old motor for some parts, because you're going to need to replace your neutral safety switch, which is a direct changeover bolt-on, and everything's the same thing. Like that little plug right there that you plug that green wire into on your KE100 is in the exact same position and will bolt on. It's interchangeable 100%. No modifications. So when you're in neutral, your green light comes on your dash. That's what that does right there. If your green light doesn't come on your dashboard, then your problem is going to be, I don't know if you can see it enough. If I can focus in on a little better. Right. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a little tab right here, and it rides on the inside of that case right there, and that right there gives you your light when it makes contact. So that's a pretty cool feature to have. So you definitely want to have that, and then you can see all the different wiring. Once again, these are all interchangeable. I've done it. It works. However, you cannot put the G4 piston on a G5 to make the cylinder work. It won't work. And I tried that. The bearing diameter is different, and the wrist pin diameter is different. So we brought out the piston that came off that G4. You can see how it's all burnt and pitted. It was actually cutting into it. Ring seizure, and that's from using the wrong octane. The G4 motor is a high compression engine and requires a premium octane, where these things run pretty good on regular. So you can see the difference in the piston heights as well. I don't know if you can see that too well from the camera. They are literally different heights. And the wrist pins, I can't even pull this one out to show you, but the wrist pin is totally different in diameter. So they're not interchangeable, which kind of sucks, because that'd be really cool to be able to put a G4 cylinder jug onto a G5, but with anything else, evolution happens, and then they did it for a reason. And then of course the G4 motor, the one I told you have to modify the exhaust, is held on with exhaust springs, whereas the G5 motor is bolted on. So these are a couple of different variables that you'd have to consider when doing this changeover. But I'm going to tell you right now, by changing them over, okay, you just took an old bike, and not only did you update it, okay, you made it so you can readily get available parts for it. I was also asked a question, and this is really cool. Can this motor be converted over to electronic ignition? The answer to that is yes. However, you're going to have to reroute some of your wiring. All these wires all go up to the regulator. You're going to have to, they don't have a regulator on the G4 motor. It uses a waffle style rectifier and a regular diode. So one of these wires becomes a field wire, and the other one goes up to the regulator, and then of course you got your ground, your ground for your, that's your ignition right there. Okay, the black one's your ignition. Then you got your two yellow wires, that's your charging. And then you got your green wire. Not your green wire, yeah, your green wire right here. One goes up to your, whatchamacallit there, your neutral safety switch. and the other one goes to your main harness. I think both of those go up to your what do you call it there, neutral safety switch, and then the pink wire goes up to your regulator. Not your regulator, your rectifier. So, and it makes a field. So you have to figure it all out. Basically, when you pull your mag off and you're looking at it, you'll be able to see where things go. But that's pretty much it for that. That's pretty much it for the conversion. Yeah, so hopefully this helps you if you decide to do the conversion. It can be done. However, the real major difference is you're gonna have to convert your exhaust over. So you're gonna want to bring, excuse me, been up all night. You're gonna want to bring your bike down to the welder and say, mark this up and you know, weld it up for me, and they can generally do a nice job. And after they're done welding, you're gonna have weld marks, and some of the stuff that you can do on that to help make it look pretty. You can use grill paint. Yep, nice can of grill paint will what do you call it? Pretty that right up. Pretty it right up. And the paint that I use whenever I do anything like this is I use a high quality paint, and Rust-Oleum makes a great paint. This is high heat and it's good up to 1200 degrees. Now if your bike hits 1200 degrees, you're gonna be replacing the bike. It's that simple. Your exhaust does get hot. It does sometimes get up that top, but these two strokes run pretty damn cool for the most part, even when you're hammering on them. Of course, you wouldn't want to touch the exhaust to find it out, but it does pretty well on the exhaust systems. I'm very happy with it. And this is the flat black. It's grill paint. You know, when you go to the hardware store, it's available at Walmart's, it's available at Ace Hardware's, all those places, and it's a really good product. In fact, I use it on my jugs on the cylinders. So actually, I'm gonna put you down for a second. This cylinder right here just came in. This is my Kawasaki KD, I almost said 80. This is the KD100 cylinder that's going on my red bike that you guys have seen quite a bit. And that's what it looks like right there when I got it. And there it is, what it looks like after I gave it a quick blast of the Rust-Oleum grill paint. And I always give props to those who make a good product. And if you make a good product, I'm gonna share it with the world. So that's what I'm about. And that's the Rust-Oleum high heat. Is it designed for engines? No, it's designed for heat. And you know what? That's okay. It'll work perfectly, and I've used it before. So I'm just sharing that with you right there. It's made by Rust-Oleum. It's good high quality. What do you call it there, paint. And I use this stuff. They even make good plastic paints. If you have like a fender that's pretty bad, they make a hell of a lime green that really matches the Kawasaki's. But yeah, I mean, look how cool that looks. Tell me that does not look badass. That is a good looking jug right there. And it dries quickly too. I just did this. I put you on pause and you will only pause. You can see right there, see right there, it's still wet. Right there. You can see it's still wet. I literally just shot this. While I put you on pause, I gave it a quick blast just for the video purpose. And yeah, I mean, it's still drying. But I mean, look, it shows up the writing really cool. I don't know if you can see the writing on the jug. Yeah, that looks pretty badass right there. And this jug right here was cleaned in my, what do you call it there, my electrolysis cleaner, which really made it come out really good. Because when I got this thing, it was a big ball of rust, and I was really worried about the cylinder. And because I bought it off of eBay, and it was cheap. It was like 35 bucks, and it was like another 15 for shipping or something like that. Anyway, it was just under 50 bucks, and I was really happy. $14.95 or something. It was just under 50, and you know, with the shipping and all that. And I cleaned it up in my my cleaner there I made, and I'll show you how that looks. You're gonna love this. Look at that. That cooked. I sprayed it down with some penetrating oil. So what you're seeing is a lot of penetrating oil right there. And I went over it really quickly with a wire brush. And I got all the thick stuff off because this right here, that motor was submerged. The motor was actually submerged in water for quite a while. And I took a chance on it. Like, you know what? I've had engines that have been completely underwater and came out perfectly fine. So, yep, you can see the paint's still drying. It looks good. I'm going to give it another coat after. But it came out pretty well. And the cylinder came out nice. There's no gouges or scrapes or scratches in it. And so I locked out with that. That's going on my KD80, and it's going to make it into a KD100. This jug and my KM100 are the same jug, same motor. So the KE100 piston, when you put this in there, it's just a smidge too small, just a smidgen. So I'm going to order a piston up for that and get a KE100 KD100 piston coming for that one. So the bore is the same bore, it is the same stroke. It's just the configuration of the rod and how they got the jug set up versus, you know, the other style. So I'm tired. So if I wanted to put this jug on my my KD80, I'd have to have it shaved. I'd have to have it brought to the machine shop and tell them how much to take it down, and then have them take it down. But we're not going to go that route. I like to keep the deck heights the way they are, keep everything factory and looking good. Look at that, the paint's dry now. Look how cool that looks. That's Rust-Oleum, people. Name you can trust. Look at that. Look how badass those numbers. I don't know if you can see the numbers or not. Look how cool that looks. Set in stone. That's grill paint right there. That is grill paint. Set for 1200 degrees. Right here. Wood stoves and more. Now, you know, if it can do a wood stove.